Oh, no.
Am I live? Oh, you are live. This is very exciting. So I'd like to welcome everybody watching this. I'm here with Paul Jaya and Tony Boydell, the doyen of British game design. I'm rather hurt you're not wearing your gown tonight, Tony, but...
Well, I'm at the top of Mount Snowdon at the moment, and it's a bit chilly, so...
Well, you're wearing a T-shirt. I mean, well done.
Yeah, well, I'm butching it out for the evening.
It's that rugged mid-Wales stock. Anyway, so we're here. We're here to talk about the campaign for Snowdonia Grand Tour. We're here to answer any of your questions that you might have. But first of all, I'm going to just go around and ask the people what they've done with this particular project. So let's start with the doyen, Tony. Explain your history with Snowdonia and your work on this newest version.
Well, I'm the designer of the original Snowdonia, a game that took me by surprise a bit, and it changed the way that I sort of presented myself to the board gaming world, and it's become something for which I'm sort of famous within the hobby. All the people I work with outside of the hobby don't give a stuff about whether I've invented a game called Snowdonia or not. But for me, it is the pinnacle of my design career. And I've never stopped designing expansions for this game. As those who purchased the master set in 2019 will remember, I designed an awful lot of stuff. But then for some reason, somebody thought that I promised at the time that was the last thing I was ever going to do with Snowdonia. I would stop and do other things. But you can never do that, especially when you've got a system as inventive and exciting to use as the Snowdonia system. So I never stopped designing stuff. And then sort of the opportunity came along to build upon the work that had been done before, particularly with things like Alubari, which is a Snowdonia expansion put into a big box. And it sort of inspired me to come along with different ideas for new scenarios that would make use of the board rather than the traditional Snowdonia scenarios of cards around the outside. And so I started working on those scenarios.
And what's fascinating is you've worked on scenarios, bigger projects connected to Snowdonia, but you're consistently designing trains and so on and so forth. Is it just a matter of you walk in the dog and you get an idea, so you knock it together on Photoshop? Is Snowdonia kind of living rent free in your head, I guess?
It is, because any situation, good or bad, that pops up, the first thought I have is, oh, is that something I could put into Snowdonia? So there was a bit during COVID, where police were driving up to people in the deserted roads and telling them to go back home, and I just thought that'd be really funny to have that as policeman telling you to go home as a promo for Snowdonia. And also, to be frank, when you're writing a daily blog on BGG, that's a lot of content to keep going. So I can always fall back on a promo train just to fill the gap if I have to. But there have been some surprises. I did one about 2 years ago, I think it was, which is based on the idea of tying somebody to the railway tracks, which of course is the ultimate sort of classic railway trope from even the earliest films. The mustachioed bad guy ties the damsel to the tracks. And I thought, well, why haven't I done that? I've been working with Snowdonia in my head since 2006. Why have I not thought of the idea of tying somebody's third worker to the track? That'd be amazing. So I did.
And before we go on, I'd just like to say that if anyone's watching this and you've got questions about anything, about the game itself, about the development, about the GameFound project, about logistical things, anything that you want to know as backers or just as people curious for Snowdonia, please pop them in the comments and we'll make sure we'll answer as many questions as we can. All right, Paul, so you've designed the Liverpool and Aintree scenario. Give us a brief précis of your history with Snowdonia and how you came to design a scenario for it.
Well, but Snowdonia, really, I first came across it when I met Tony, and with Tony running the
you poor man.
I know, the Museum of Board Games, and myself and my wife popped in there one afternoon, and I didn't know who Tony was, never heard of Snowdonia, but I was into board games, So why I hadn't heard of Snowdonia, I don't know. But and it
ironically, you've been playing Scandaroon for the last 10 years.
I've not had that pleasure yet, Ben. So
I don't think anyone's had the pleasure.
Yeah, no one's ever used pleasure and Scandaroon in the same sentence. So, yeah.
So anyway, yeah. So he introduced me to Snowdonia, and I grabbed a master set off him, and really it just clicked with me as a great worker placement game, and enjoyed it. And then he started running playtesting in the museum, and for the scenarios that would eventually become the ones in the Grand Tour. And I said, oh, well, I've got an idea for a scenario. So it didn't take him much to twist my arm to develop the scenario, which was the Liverpool. Well, originally it was the Liverpool Loop, which was actually where my daughter lives up in Liverpool, where the track now is no longer a railway. It's actually just a cycle and footpath that runs all the way around Liverpool, and thought that would be good. And it goes up to Aintree, so I introduced the Grand National, so everyone is owning a horse in the Grand National whilst they're building the railway, and that's really how it developed.
And so, have you got other design credits? Do you have a design pedigree, or is it just the sort of solid base of Snowdonia that allows you to enter the design world?
I think it's the beauty that Snowdonia is such a solid mechanism that the scenarios that are in the Grand Tour, a lot of them are Snowdonia, but not as you know it. They really are taking that mechanism and doing some really quite interesting things with it.
And are you a gambling man, or was it just that you were in Liverpool and you thought, well, you've got to put the Grand National into it?
Yeah, I'm not into horse racing at all. No, I'm not. With living in Gloucester, we got Cheltenham races on our doorstep, and I've never been to Cheltenham races, and I'm not really a horse racing or gambling person, but it was a natural fit because the line went up to Aintree, and it was a way of introducing horse racing. I didn't really introduce any new mechanisms as such, because anyone who plays Snowdonia knows that the weather plays such an important part during the game that it can change how you play the game. So I introduced the horse racing as part of the weather system. So as the weather changes, so certain horses will move around the track, and it means that we're not introducing lots of new rules really to a scenario to keep it fun.
I mean, it was really fun. If you've got a group of people who are willing to spend time play testing a design with you. I mean, I threw it out to the guys. So I know they're all great games players. And I thought, well, come on, guys, if you've got an idea for a scenario, then just let's have a look. I'm open to that kind of sort of input from friends and games players alike. And Paul sort of had me when he said it was Liverpool based, because I have a special affection for Liverpool, having gone to Polytechnic there, and I love the place dearly. So it was no great stretch to sort of get on board with that particular theming. And then to see the familiar places and the idea of the horse race and the gambling on horses, I thought was fantastic. So I could have opened it out to the guys and they could have come back with just Snowdonia, but with just a different railway name at the top. But they all came to it with a different twist, different levels of, someone like Dave Wood, who couldn't make it this evening, but David's Clibri Mortimer scenario very much reflects his gaming tastes, games with a little bit more complexity. So he likes a harder game, a meatier game. So it's Snowdonia, but there's a bit more meat on the bone to it. So each of the guys brought things about themselves to the game as well, which I love, because it means that each scenario shines with a particular personality that comes from the designer and also the theme itself.
I am rather disappointed, though, that the Clibri scenario doesn't include the Clibri Disco, where I massively failed to cop off with girls when I was 16.
If only we'd known in the development process, Ben. You didn't get in touch.
So we're getting.
You're not that old, Ben. It's set before you, so yeah. It'd be a bit weird to have a sort of 1930s Clibby Mortimer with Ben, messing about, doing the walk of shame.
We've got, I assume, one of your friends, Tony, Goonmaster 444, who is telling you to take off your atrocious beanie. He's also saying that nobody cares. He's also told all of us, I assume, to shut up. And then I'm going to put this on the screen. Goonmaster 444 says, "Shut your bold ass up, freak."
Oh, you gotta love it. You gotta love spam, haven't you? I mean,
thank you, Goonmaster.
Yes, thank you for your attention.
I personally have. I've practiced a lot, but I've never reached master level. So, Jaya, so you're not only a designer of a scenario in this game, you're also its developer. So,
yes.
First of all, give us a sort of potted history of who you are in games, how you got into developing, how you got into designing, how you got into working with Naylor, and then what you've done for this new version of Snowdonia.
Sure. So I've always enjoyed games since I was a kid. I was often making, just literally just cutting up paper and turning them into trading card games. I was obsessed with, all the things, Pokemon, Yu-Gi-Oh, all that stuff as a kid. And then got to uni and through school was playing lots of trading card games. I did a lot of like wheeling and dealing of online of various trading cards and all this kind of stuff. And then at uni I was buying a copy of Uno, I know, dirty word, for the house that I was living in, and found a game called Smash Up at the time. And then I was from there, found Will Wheaton's tabletop YouTube channel. And then suddenly all this whole world of tabletop games I didn't know existed unfurled. And I was like, whoa, hang on a second. You mean these trading card games I've been playing, which cost an arm and a leg and require finding someone else who's cost an arm and a leg, and all of this just to play one game, and they need to be balanced against each other, yada, yada, yada. You're saying all of that exists in a box for 40 quid and we can just play it with anyone? Wow. So yeah, obviously I played the classics, but yeah, discovering this world of hobby board games is really exciting, and sort of I kind of became the center really of games for my friend group. I just ended up buying loads and loads of them, was regularly having friends round, playing them all the time, just really enjoyed it. And then I moved to London when I was 23 and became, through a very happenstantial, really, right people, right time. But I was doing an acting gig and got invited to a birthday party by one of the people there who had been childhood friends with James Naylor, who I then met at that party. And I was very enthusiastic, maybe a little tipsy, but he said that he made board games, and I'd never met someone who made board games professionally before, so I was very excited to meet him. And he said that he was going to Essen in Germany with his design Magnate, the first city, which I went with him and demoed it. And then, it was all a bit Cinderella, really. It turned out that I'd just moved to Croydon and lived sort of 2 minutes away from where he was. And a few months after Essen, he just kind of sent me a message being like, hey, do you think you'd be interested in working for me? And so, it was kind of just me and him at his kitchen table for a while, just working on Magnate and things like this. And obviously from there, the business has grown and my involvement has grown, and I've been the lead developer on all the games since, which is really good fun. Apologies if that was a bit of a shaggy dog story, but
no, fantastic.
And just to explain, in case anyone doesn't know what a developer is, it's often the role, especially when you're talking to people not in board games, they're like, what on earth's a developer? And I sort of always explain it as kind of like the editor, like the way the editor to the author. You're sort of tidying up the edges, polishing the ideas. Tony creates diamonds in the rough, and then sometimes they're just straight diamonds, but then I try to polish off the edges and help whatever the core idea is come through and shine.
And so, but you've also gone on to design one of the scenarios, and I was told that the idea behind this scenario is that tastes have skewed, especially amongst hobby gamers, tastes have skewed heavier over the last sort of decade. and your scenario is there for the players who want a bit more
Yes, absolutely.
complexity in their Snowdonia, right?
Yeah, completely. So I think what is fascinating about Snowdonia is that because it's such a powerful core system, it can be many different things. And for some people, that will all be for them. Some people, it will be some of it. And I think something that this creates, that the challenge this creates, is that some people, if you're going to put the Mount Snowdon scenario in front of you, because we live in an age where people don't have the patience to play a game more than once, is they might play it and then go, oh, that was a bit simple for me, turn their nose up at it and move on. And I think they'd be making a huge mistake, of course. But we created the Stockton and Darlington scenario to be an introductory point for people who are maybe very experienced Eurogame players already. I mean, Tony mentioned Dave earlier, who is another designer who likes his games more complex. He'd be exactly who I'd be pitching the Stockton and Darlington at, where it's still very much focused on the core of Snowdonia. The twists I'm making are not introducing any big fancy new thing. I'm not bringing in a murder mystery, for your introductory scenario, but it does just mean there's a bit more to do, and it plays into my taste as well. I mean, as a card game player, I always loved combos and feeling clever tricks, things like that. So it mainly focuses on getting players to engage with contracts more, and giving them more things to do with contracts than they usually could. And given that's one of the most important aspects of the game, that new players are infamously known for missing and then being quite punished by because they ignored them, I wanted to make something that sort of really pushed those on players and got them involved with them.
And so, do you feel like you've to some degree become poacher turned gamekeeper, or maybe gamekeeper turned poacher, being a designer on this as opposed to a developer? And I was trying to dredge up the Latin there, but I don't know who develops the developer. You know what I mean?
It's a good question. So I think the two skills are very different, but they also overlap a lot as well. And I think, the developer, they're often interchangeable. So for example, with Stockton and Darlington, I got Tony to look at it as my developer a couple of times. James Naylor, the CEO of Naylor Games, having designed a game himself, obviously in Magnate, I bounce things back and forth with him sometimes. He's a really good sounding board to have in the office. And so, yeah, I suppose those guys were my main voices, but then also play testing it with people, having things there. And it did change quite a bit from the initial interpretation. I think the initial interpretation was, at first it was much more about sort of extra tracks. It was like, well, if you look at all the complex Euro boards, they've all got this extra track here for this thing and this track for this thing. And it sort of did the job, but it wasn't very compelling. And so it was through I think showing that to James was quite good at pointing out what wasn't quite working with it. And Tony's always really good at just sort of having light bulb moments and then just throwing them into the pot and see what this is.
Didn't we kind of riff? There's a bit of a riff on Brass with the canal era going into the railway era, or 18XX with trains rusting, in the sense that you could start the game with horses, but then they get killed off and become trains in the train era. That was something that we were chuckling about early doors, I think.
Yeah, they get gently retired, Tony.
Yes, I just get my pot of Station Master's glue and my lasagna.
We sent them off to Aintree for the race.
Yeah.
So they'll definitely get murdered at the end of the race. Then, yeah, we all know how punishing that particular sporting event is.
So Tony, I want to talk about this new campaign from your perspective. So, Snowdonia was published by Surprise Step, your company, that you're no longer involved with. And then you did the board and dice, the big board and dice master set with everything. And this feels like a sort of paring back of that sort of decadence. How did you get involved with Naylor Games, and what were your feelings coming back to Snowdonia and seeing the new elements? And is there any sense that people are taking away your baby, or have you had a hand in all of the various scenarios?
Well, I contacted Naylor Games, I think, after a couple of announcements they made on Twitter when I was on Twitter back in the day, and I thought, well, I've got my property back, I got my rights back to my games, and I think James was sort of talking about acquisitions, but also looking for, you know, classics, forever games, if you like. And I thought, well, I'll do what I did with Hanno Gurk back in 2011, and I just sent him a message just on the off chance, because he could only say no. I said, I've got this game, Snowdonia, I've got the rights to it. Here's the link to it, because I don't presume to think that everybody knows what Snowdonia is, or what it meant, you know. So and James said, well, yeah, I've played Snowdonia, I like Snowdonia, and we just got talking about it, and I elaborated on my ideas of bigger scenarios that did a bit more than just the deck of cards, and it was just a natural process just to move on. To move on. I mean, it's good to go back away from that decadence. I mean, the map boards look beautiful, but the whole approach to the physical design is about easy setup. It's about quick start, quick takedown. All the information you need is there on the board. No superfluous components. I mean, you see a lot of projects that have got beautiful components, but they're just over the top, and it's wasteful. And I to a great extent, my inspiration as a game designer has always been based on Lookout Games, and Lookout Games were doing sort of ecologically sound manufacturing ideas right back in the early 20s. You know, they were using no plastics. They were wrapping decks of cards up in paper rather than cellophane. So, you know, it just felt like coming home to a small company that wasn't just about the buck. You know, this was a project of love from their side as well as from mine. So I'd never felt that I was giving my baby away. I was just sort of moving into a large hippie commune, and they're all looking after my baby with me. Yeah, go on.
Can you give us an overview of this? Because the original Snowdonia and the Board and Dice version, the scenarios come in decks of cards, and they're dealt out along the board, and that's how the game sort of is set out. What are the differences in this new version?
Well, there's far fewer cards for a start. You don't need cards around the outside. It's all represented on the map. One of the things that I unashamedly stole from the games like Le Havre in the original Snowdonia was the different player counts, the setups, the worker placement spaces that were based on cards. You don't need that anymore because they're all printed on the board. The idea is, we don't need cards for track because they're little tokens that go on the board now, and they're reusable across different scenarios. If you look at the master set, there's a little deck for absolutely everything, even if that meant duplicating things in certain cases. Everything was sort of broken, atomized into, you know, I need a card for this, but nothing on the back. If there was something on the back before, then that's now on a separate card. And it looks great. I mean, 2019 is a long time ago, but it's not that long ago. But you can see how at the time that was quite an exciting prospect for people to get something like Snowdonia, get everything that had ever been done, and have it done in such a luxurious sort of way. But looking back on it 6 years away from there, it does seem a bit quaint because it's just printed wooden pieces and some cards. Nowadays, you'd have to have a 4-foot resin model that you could pleasure an elephant with. So I always have to drag that one out when I'm talking about modern overproduced board games. It always reminds me of Frago Games, who used to do these amazing productions. But I lost my train of thought now. I'm thinking about the elephant.
Pun not intended. Paul, I want to talk to you because I think it's fascinating. I've been trying to design a game, and it's hit the buffers basically because I've play tested it, and it's not enough there. It functions as a game, but there's not enough there. I mean, how does someone who has designed before think, okay, I'm going to design? And then how do you have the cojones to put this in front of people, including the designer of the game? And you know, were there moments where you lost heart, that you thought, what the bloody hell am I doing? Or was it all sort of smooth sailing?
The very first kind of prototype, it was the horse race was just kind of tagged on the end, and once players had completed the railway, then there was the horse race took place, and if people had any player tokens left, they could then place these on the horses, and it was simply rolling dice to see which horse won. But in discussing it with Tony, he said, well, it'd be better if we could incorporate the horse race whilst the railway's being built, and that's where I don't know, it just kind of made logical sense in terms of the weather system, that horse racing and the different types of going, you can whether it's heavy going, firm, etc., is affected by the weather. So it just naturally seemed a good fit to include the horse race with the weather system, and you could run it at the same time as the game. So it's, each round weather will change, and depending on what going the horse likes, then if it's sunny, then the ones that like firm going will move around the track, and if it becomes wet and rainy, then the ones that prefer heavy going, they'll move around. So it's and as I said, the people that when we play tested that version, people were getting really involved in the betting on horses, because you can bet on other people's horses. You don't just bet on your own horse, and you could influence how quickly it moves around the track, around the course. But there was some quite a bit of assistance from Tony. But going back to the space game of Snowdonia, I think because it is such a solid system that had already been developed in lots of different ways with the master set in terms of lots of different scenarios, but I think it's gone to another level now with the Grand Tour in terms of where that system's gone and how it's been developed in different ways.
Yeah, I appreciated that Paul spent his time coming up with an idea, and so I had to start game design at some point, and my designs were a little bit wobbly and needed a bit of gentle coaxing. So my attitude was, I had to start somewhere, and I got a bit of luck to go forward. I'm not going to start beating up on somebody else if they're not, otherwise why would I bother asking anybody else? I want something of them in that. So spotting the things that I needed telling about when I was first designing games is just natural. It's sort of giving something back, and it's important as well that Jaya was willing to step into me and say, that bit doesn't work, Tony, or that bit that's not right. And I mean, there are a couple of scenarios that never made it to Grand Tour because Jaya was brave enough to say to me, look, this doesn't feel right. This doesn't really work. It doesn't have a uniqueness to it that makes it worthy of a place in something like this. And I think I needed to be brave to say to Tom and Paul and Dave if there was something I didn't like, but there was no pressure to force them down my solutions. And the same way, I appreciate that Jai was brave enough to sort of to talk to me in that way, because otherwise you won't get the best that it can possibly be if you just ignore everybody's input.
So Jaya, going on to that then, can you take us through? So we've got the Snowdonia scenario, we've got the Liverpool and Aintree scenario, we've got the Stockton and Darlington. Can you take us through the other scenarios in the Grand Tour and sort of what they offer to someone in the Snowdonia world, and also if you could give us an overview of the campaign?
Yeah, of course. Okay, so that's a pretty big question because we've got 12 scenarios in that box to talk through. Yeah, so within Grand Tour you've got 12 scenarios. That's been made clear, but they are specifically designed to try to encompass a lot of different types of experience. Obviously, all of them recognizably Snowdonia, but how close to that core Snowdonia are they vary. So for example, at the lower end, which is closer to what you're used to, we've got things like the Demerara Berbice Railway, where you can get trains out the gate, which is a bit faster than usual. You've got this extra resource in the form of sugar, which you can refine for some high scoring points later. But the core gimmick, one of the biggest game field changes there, is that the event track only has one event where the track gets built, and then something where the sugar becomes available in the refinery. Otherwise, the game's not getting involved. which means you can suddenly play the game at a very different pace. So a lot of people, newbies especially, often complain and huff and puff about the game excavating things for them, laying the tracks, building the stations. You don't like that? Here's the scenario where they don't do that. The Uganda Railway is one that, again, is fairly similar to the core, but instead adds a bit of antagonism in the form of lions that can potentially eat your workers if they're stood in the wrong place. But again, you know willingly that you're putting them at risk when you do that. So it creates this sort of interesting risk reward system there. So that's kind of on the core end. We've got twists more like that. As we step up a bit, we have something like the Florida Overseas Railroad, which is the Key West extension specifically, I believe, where you've got overseas sections of track to build. So instead of taking the rubble off, you're putting rubble in, which is akin to this idea has been explored in older scenarios, but here you've also got a bunch of additional G actions. A bit of a design principle that you'll see all throughout Grand Tour is attempts, well, not attempts, successes at making the surveyor a bit more involved than you're used to. In base Snowdonia, the surveyor is a little closer to a pass action. I mean, he's not a pass action. You get some points, and it's nice to watch them go around the track, but there's not much more to it than that. You take the action, you get some points, that's it. So we were thinking, well, what are all these ways? I think the surveyor has so much character to it as a piece. We were like, what are these other ways we can get them involved? And so, for example, in the Uganda scenario I just mentioned, they're a paddle steamer, and it's a bit of a race. You have to assemble the paddle steamer at the other end of the line. So it's a race to move the surveyor. Whoever gets there first gets a big points bonus. Everyone else gets a bit less. And then there's a few mechanics on trains or stations that can accelerate them, as an example. So in Florida, your surveyor gives you additional you get better capacity to excavate and fill in rubble depending on where they're stood. But then as you move on, while you get more points, their ability to help you diminishes. So there's a bit of that going on there. So those are the probably more simpler end. If I go up the bigger and bolder end, we start getting to things like the Isle of Wight or the Tokyo Metro, which increase. The Tokyo Metro was designed by Tom Henley, one of the guest designers, and those increase the number of railways you're building. So base Snowdonia, you're used to a single railway. The Isle of Wight turns that into 3 railways that are sort of side by side. And you've got this yacht race going on. Again, this is the surveyor being made a bit more interesting, and everything you're doing is affecting how fast that surveyor is completing their yacht race while you build 3 railways at once. Then the Tokyo Metro takes that another level further, and you've got 5 lines that you're building at once that actually intersect at certain points because it's a subway network. And in that one, your surveyor is actually going around the network. So instead of a line where it's points at one end and the other, they can collect tickets from the various Tokyo stations that function as additional objectives and points you can score. But flooding can come and block parts of the track, which change the shape of the board and where you can excavate, where your surveyor can move. So that ups it a bit. I call those are sort of like Snowdonia that you know, but sort of more. And then we get to the really radical ones, which would be things like the Belle Epoque scenario, which has been, I think a lot of people are very aware of, which is the murder mystery, which is still using those same core actions you're more or less familiar with, but you're now using them to play a deduction game in addition to everything else. Or indeed, Dave Wood's scenario, the Calibri Mortimer, which sees you doing all sorts of different things. Instead of you are building a railway in one corner of the map, which is between various bits of mining equipment. It's a quarry that you're building, and you can get yourself additional sort of permanent bonuses there. But you've also got a little train piece that's going up and down a already built railway, which has various colored tickets on it you're trying to collect for a completely purpose-built contract deck. So you want to collect different colored tickets by paying different resources as you're going up and down there. And then there's another layer above that where you have the hills of Calibri Mortimer, where you are sort of got your surveyor is now a shepherd who is moving around these hills collecting sheep, which you can use to get extra workers and so on. And then once they've got the sheep out the way, you're actually going to dynamite the hills to get rubble to create more quarry. And yeah, there's all these additional layers going on so that it feels sort of, again, it's still very recognizably Snowdonia. No, none of these fundamentally break that really just golden core worker placement loop, but they really do start to feel like very significantly different activities. And I think what I love about them personally is that so many of them feel like almost board games unto themselves. Oh, apologies, let me just silence that. So not from the perspective of being alien, but from the perspective of the replay value is so high on a lot of these that you could play those a few times and get good at them specifically, only to go to another scenario and find you're going to have to relearn some things. I mean, do you want me to go through every scenario in the box?
Well, give me an insight on how the campaign works then, because that's what's really caught my eye when I was listening to the video, and somehow you got Michael Sheen to do the video for you, and his narration was so gripping that I thought the campaign sounded fantastic.
Well then, let me pick up where dear Mr. Sheen left off. So, yeah, the campaign modes have been a design between Tony and I. Really, it's been a bit of a back and forth, and sees players taking on the role of a historical railway figure. So this could be someone more explicitly involved in the railway, such as Sir Nigel Gresley, or it could be someone more tangentially connected to the railway. So, for example, Edith Nesbit, the author of the Railway Children book series, which is maybe to people outside of Britain less well known, I'm not entirely sure, but or even somewhat semi-mythical figures such as John Henry, the famous man with a hammer that beat the sort of drilling machine, so to speak. Anyhow, you take a character and then you get given a deck of cards. It's only 10 cards. It's not, I'm not going to tell you to go away and count your lands and get your ratios right. You just get given a deck of 10 cards, and that depends on the character you've chosen. So you pick your character, you get your cards, and then you play a Snowdonia scenario, except you have 4 cards in your hand from this deck. And fundamentally, they're a little bit like contracts, but not quite as explosive, and they're got a slightly wider variety of effects. And you can play them when you place your worker. So a really basic one would be in the starting decks would be Excavation Expertise, which means I place my worker on the B action, play this card, and all my workers on the B action this round are going to get +1 excavation rate. So that's something I can use to increase my excavation ability. Or you have Building Expertise, which lets you build in a station one further away than you would normally be able to. So normally you have to wait for all the rubble to be cleared. This lets you get one of the spots a little bit further ahead. And so this deck starts out with this variety of abilities. And I think what's quite nice about it, even at this level, is it incentivizes, it gives you another layer of opportunities to think about. I think Snowdonia is quite a fundamentally tactical game. And so these cards add another layer to that of what should I be doing. And maybe your hand is going to guide you one way, maybe what another player is doing might guide you another, and you've got to sort of piece that all together. It adds a kind of another layer of complexity, I suppose. But once you've completed the scenario, you will earn some gold. You'll get a certain amount just for participating, and then there's additional to be earned based on fulfilling certain criteria that you then spend on cards from a sort of shop deck that you'll be dealt. And you can pick which ones of those you want to purchase. They all cost different amounts depending on how powerful or not they are, to add to your deck on a 1-in 1-out system. So the deck always remains nice and small and manageable, and your slightly weaker starter cards will quite quickly be getting replaced by stronger ones you've bought along the way, which is an opportunity for you to take the starter deck you've been given and customize it. Some of the starter decks are deliberately very broad. Some of them are slightly more focused on a play style. So if you are someone that likes to excavate all the time, you can play the character who specializes slightly more in excavating. Equally, if you're more mercurial and you prefer a broader style, there's characters for that too. But then through what you purchase, you can really start to characterize them some more, find different things to synergize with, and so on. And then the final thing that you can add to the deck as well are souvenir cards, and these are quite exciting. We've made a special souvenir for every scenario, both in the Grand Tour and in the special edition and everything that came before. There's one scenario card per one souvenir card for each of these, and that is a card that a player can unlock during the scenario by fulfilling a special mission unique to that scenario. So for example, in the Isle of Wight, if you complete the first lap of the yacht race before anyone else, you'll get the souvenir for the Isle of Wight. And what's quite fun is that these ones are much more themed to the scenario. So for example, the souvenir for the Belle Epoque is the murder weapon, and the effects on them are slightly more out there, but earning them is going to be a bit of a challenge because a lot of them are deliberately, maybe what they're asking you to do in the scenario to unlock them might run slightly more counter to what is objectively the best thing to do to score the most victory points. And so I think this is something players are going to be weighing up. It's the same thing with the criteria for earning the additional gold during the scenario to buy extra cards. And so just adds this thing to think about, because you're playing 4 scenarios in the campaign. I should have said that right from the start. 4 scenarios in the campaign that you're playing, and whoever has the most sort of tournament points by the end, at the end of each scenario, you'll be given some tour points based on your ranking, slightly increasing as it goes on, so that you've got a way to stay in there. Is the winner. So you might be thinking, well, actually, maybe I'll deliberately, I can see I'm not doing well in this game already, so maybe I'll pivot my strategy around trying to get as much gold as I can and maybe unlock the souvenir. And even though I won't rank as highly, I'll have upgraded a lot and then come back later. It just adds a lot of nuances and knobs to twiddle to the whole system. And yeah, I mean, I had a huge hand in making it, so I'm very biased, but I really enjoy it and think it's a really fun way to play the game. And
I think it's a great nod to players who already experienced and love Snowdonia with the older scenarios, because it involves everything. One of the key points early doors was, if we're going to have a campaign mode, and my original campaign mode was much more raw than the one that Jai has beaten it into shape to. So is that it has to be backwardly compatible. There's several elements to the whole Grand Tour project that are bringing those who already have Snowdonia along with us. It's not just a cynical, here's some new stuff, buy it and go away. It's, by the way, you guys over there who have looked after us and served us really well over the last 15 years, this is for you as well if you want it. So the campaign souvenirs, you can go back and play the Bluebell line as part of the campaign. And as Jai says, there's a souvenir that you can claim. And so you can mix and match old and new scenarios with the campaign mode and the various characters that you can play as part of the campaign. It's about backward compatibility. And the other aspect, of course, which I think we would need to sort of stress, is the fact that the master set in all its glory also came with a huge number of typos and confusions and ambiguities and mistakes, which Naylor Games had no obligation to fix whatsoever. But being the kind-hearted folks that they are, and in line with this idea of bringing those who love Snowdonia already along with us for the ride, are producing a fix pack. And I think, Jai, if you want to say some more about that. I know on GameFan there's been lots of questions about it, and for some folks it's been quite difficult to understand what it's actually doing. But over to you, Jai.
Yeah, of course. So the fix pack is specifically for deluxe master set owners. If you don't own the deluxe master set, this fix pack is completely irrelevant to you. It's just designed effectively as a patch to that product. And I think the sort of star of the show really is the amended scenario book. So there are 17 scenarios in the deluxe master set. 18 if you include Mount Snowdon. But this book has some pretty severe errors in it. There are times where you're told to put certain alterations to the event track into play in scenarios where there should be no alterations. There are entire rules missing, entire sections from one scenario added to another. Some of them, with the rules as written, are genuinely unplayable. So this is obviously a real shame because the quality of the game design in there is really high, and so that was something we really wanted to provide with people, because there has been a back and forth effort to solve bits and pieces of it, but even still, with those efforts, there are still some issues, and I think there's really clearly a lot of dedicated fans who are logging these errors and wanting to get things fixed because they love Snowdonia so much, and it's just not quite come together for them, and we thought there's something we could offer. But it's not just this scenario book. Also, a lot of the cards are misprinted, so we're sorting out those. And then even in the fix pack, there was an older fix pack, and even that itself introduced some more errors. So there'll be some fixing of that. Adding some rubble cubes, because there are some scenarios in there that need more rubble cubes than the deluxe master set had, and I think some people felt like, well, hang on, I've forked out for what's supposedly the deluxe master set, and I'm having to substitute with bits and pieces from my other game. What's that about? And yeah, it's an ongoing process. We want to work with the community. We've started recruitment for that just earlier this week, and we want to work with the community to figure out exactly, what this fix pack needs to be. We've obviously done plenty of research ourselves. We think we know what it needs to be, but we want to work with the community, because we don't want to repeat what happened last time, where they took what they thought the community wanted, they made something, it was still not quite right. So that's why anything we make, we're going to send out to everyone to proofread. And yeah, we can make these deluxe master sets into beautiful products. Now, obviously, if that's all you want, fair enough, that's what you can do. Although I would hope that the special edition and Grand Tour then adds to this to create, a really just fantastic. I mean, once you've got all of those, you've got enough Snowdonia to last you for life, really.
Well, I mean, until I design some more scenarios.
Absolutely. And then, well, actually, no, this is a good point. Actually, this is a good point worth making, I think, is that the scenario design, having played all of it at this point, and therefore sort of having seen the sort of zoomed out big picture of Snowdonia from a decade ago or more to Snowdonia today, I think something maybe some people are struggling to understand is just how much the quality of the average scenario has increased. That's not to say that there aren't some really amazing ones from the older days. There absolutely are. But I think if you were to put all of the scenarios in the master set as sort of team A and all of the scenarios from sort of Grand Tour in team B, I think that you're getting a really, really strong offering here. Saying that as, I suppose, a fan, really, as someone who's played through all of it, I've probably played more of it than a lot of the players have, and yeah, there's some really, really cool ideas in Grand Tour that, to be honest, to anyone who just likes games, I would just recommend you try and just experience kind of seeing all the different shapes and forms a single worker placement system can take. So yeah, I know some master set owners are definitely a little skeptical about Grand Tour. They're a little bit skeptical of the boards, or they're skeptical of why do I need more. But I'd ask you to take an open-minded approach, because this really is quite fresh compared to what you know. It's not just more of what you already have. It's actually quite different in an exciting way.
So we've had a couple of.
Oh, sorry.
Oh, sorry,
Yeah.
Paul.
Going back to the campaign, Jaya, can you do it solo? Is it a solo?
Yes, that's a really good question. Thank you, Paul. The solo mode.
We've had a question saying how many of the scenarios are playable solo.
Aha. The answer to that is literally all of them except one. The only scenario that is not playable solo is the Belle Epoque. It's a murder mystery, and it does fundamentally depend on other players having hands of cards that you can deduce things from, and they can deduce things from you. And there's just not really quite an organic way to make that work. The solo team did work on something, but they tested it and they just felt it was so different from the experience of what the scenario was in its normal form that it didn't really make much sense to publish it. So that one's not. But this is something exciting for the fix pack, is that we are introducing solo scenarios for all of the master set. So in the original version of the master set, I believe only 5 or 6 maybe of the scenarios had playable solo mode with them out of the 17 or so. The solo team have developed solo modes for every single one of those now. So if you own a master set, buy a fix pack and have this, the amount of solo content you've got at your fingertips has just gone from 5 scenarios to well, almost 30. So yeah, that's the solo situation. And the campaign mode is also fully soloable. There's a sort of special mode where as you buy cards and upgrade your deck, the bot is going to upgrade in response, and it has different ways it can upgrade flexibly based on what you're doing, so that again you are still getting the full experience of the campaign mode, of the upgrades, of opponents getting stronger in that solo form. So yeah, I've solo players are getting a really strong offering here.
So someone has asked, can you elaborate on any significant differences between the new solo rules and the bot Dell, if there are any?
Yes, so this was a question from GameFound, I believe. And yes, so the differences to the core bot Dell system are almost all just sort of ease of use upgrades that simultaneously simplify its operation, making it easier to use, and improve the level of intelligence it plays at. So for example, something you had to do with the old solo mode that was quite finicky was at certain points in the game, once enough events had occurred, the bot would lose all of its resources, but you'd have to tally up what it lost, and then it would score points based on that. And that was quite annoying, because one of the elegant things about Snowdonia is that you can do all of the scoring up at the end. But for solo players, this was forcing them to do some admin work several times over the course of the game to keep track of that, remember it, or track it on something, and then add that to the score at the end. So we've completely done away with that. You no longer need to do this, which makes it much less disruptive to the flow, which is really nice. And also a lot of the logic on how it chooses its actions has been simplified. So in BotDel, there's sometimes it's going to take this action, and then it's going to count the number of cubes it has, and if it's this many it does this thing, but if it's that many it does that thing, and you sort of are going down a list of quite a lot of order of operations till you would figure out what it was going to do this turn. And that worked. It was a perfectly workable system. It just maybe had a few more steps in it than were ideal, and again, those have largely been simplified in terms of operation. But actually, as far as the bot goes as an opponent, if anything, it's gotten more challenging, more interesting. It adheres to more of the game now. Something the old bot Dell had to do, I think, in its system was ignore certain game mechanics. It didn't really adhere to the weather as much. It just sort of was able to cheat its third worker without a train, whereas now it does actually buy a train. It does adhere to fog. If there's fog, it can't do certain things. And I think all of this really helps to bring it more into line with feeling like another human opponent. So yeah, those I would say are the biggest changes to what it feels like to play bot Dell, and the quality of it as an opponent.
So we have another question. Do the new board scenarios provide sufficient space for the moving parts? Thinking specifically of sufficient space for the stockyard, especially as it fills. The boards look great, but busy.
Yeah, fair enough. So I completely understand the concern about boards looking busy. Obviously, it makes sense wanting to keep everything nice and neat. Obviously, the original Snowdonia with the cards around the edge, there was a simplicity to just following that. there's several points to say here. Firstly, is that the boards that you see on a computer screen are very different from the ones when you're playing them in real life. These are big boards. They take up a lot of table space. Not so much that they're going to be difficult to fit on a table. You'll fit them on your table, but once they are at that scale, it's a lot easier to distinguish things from one another. It becomes a lot more obvious what's going where and what's happening. I think the other thing to bear in mind as well is that we are going to have a recommended play order for scenarios in these boxes, and you are not going to be dumped in it at the busiest board you're seeing. So the Tokyo Metro, for example, which I'd say is the most densely packed board of them all because it's got 5 lines on it. If you started there, that probably is going to feel a bit overwhelming, but that's because we don't intend you to start there. You know, we would never recommend introducing a new player to Grand Tour with the Tokyo Metro scenario. We'd say play an earlier one so you kind of absorb the idea of how a board works, and then you work your way up. So yes, also we're thoroughly testing all of them. Anywhere that, you know, if we play them with real people and they're reporting this thing needs a tweak, that thing needs a tweak, we're listening to that, and we've already improved a lot of them, even from what you're currently seeing on the campaign page, which is really great stuff. So yeah, and as things like stockyards filling up and so on, so far it's all been fine. It's all been accommodated. The only situation where I could foresee a possible issue with this coming up is if you are throwing players who have not played on boards before into the deep end with some of the bigger scenarios. And yeah, but I'd say for the majority of them, this is a non-concern really once you've got it in front of you.
So I'm going to start with Paul, and then we'll go Tony, and then finish with Jaya on this question. As we start to wind up, I think this seems quite a good question, and this is, I'd be interested to know how the campaign's progress has measured up to your expectations so far, and is there anything you would have done differently with it, with the benefit of 2 weeks hindsight? So, Paul.
Well, being this my kind of first introduction into sort of crowdfunding. From a producer's kind of side of it, I've obviously kickstarted lots of games myself personally, but being on the other end, it's been really exciting. I can't really comment on how the level of success that we've achieved so far, whether that fits in with what Naylor Games are anticipating, but you know, I think we're about 150,000, something like that now at the moment, and yeah, I think it'd be great if we could get 200 plus, maybe more by the end of the campaign. That would be really great.
Well, I mean, you've got to pay the actor who did the voiceover. I imagine Michael Sheen's expensive. Tony?
Yeah, I'm very pleased with it. I mean, it's been a long time since I've been involved with a crowdfunding campaign. The last one was the Board and Dice Master Set, but that was a very differently managed affair. I think that was, again, at the point in time where crowdfunding it was essential to keep people on the point of permanent excitement all the time. And so every day for that campaign, there were 2 stretch goals on offer that would be very easily attainable. There was so much stuff going into the box on top of what was already sort of in the base remit. It was a real sort of panic campaign. And I think a lot of people have become cynical with crowdfunding because of all these greatly promised things, all these extra expansions, all these add-ons that, you know, you can only get if we get to $200,000, whatever it might be. And people have learned that actually these things aren't worth it. You know, these extra bonuses aren't as exciting as they first looked. And I think again, going right back to sort of talking about how this would actually come to life in crowdfunding, is that we actually wanted to go away from that. You know, here's 150 different stretch goals. You can have all this extra stuff going on, and go back to the game itself. The game itself is the most important thing. Doesn't matter how many wonderful, extra, beautiful miniatures you add to it, all the chrome and everything else. If the game is rubbish, all of that bling is for nothing. and everyone's 200 quid out of pocket. You know, it's just not an approach. I think a lot of companies have matured over the years to just take this more sensible approach. Here's the game. It's really good. We're doing really good quality components, but we're not overdoing it, because fundamentally it's about the product itself. I mean, obviously, I'd love it to be $1 million campaign, but, you know, that's reserved for games like Agricola, you know. But, you know, I think there's a life to this game beyond the crowdfunding as well. Let's not forget that there's only a very small percentage of people who are on the GameFound campaign compared to those who would come into contact with Snowdonia in a friendly local game store. So to think that these are the only people who are ever going to be interested and look at the game would be a mistake, I think. So we will support and be guided by the people on the GameFound campaign. It's a very, very active and thriving sort of comments environment there. But there is another universe to this game beyond that crowdfunding. So yes, it would be lovely to go into the big numbers, but it's already at big numbers. This is a fantastic success. It's met its funding goal, and we're going to be able to get the game out there. And I hope, just like when Snowdonia came out in 2012, that initial push will ripple out, and the word of mouth will mean that people will go into the shops and say, do you know what, I'd like to buy a copy of that because my mate said it was really good. And then, you know, who knows what will happen with future Snowdonia projects as a result of it.
And Jaya, you've returned.
Hello, apologies.
No problem at all. And yeah, would you like to answer that question? And I'll have one more question for you, and then I'll let these lovely people get to their evenings.
Yeah, of course. So, I mean, obviously, with 2 weeks hindsight, there's so many things could have, would have, should have. I mean, that is sort of something that could go on forever. But I think specifically, we underestimated the amount of confusion there would be surrounding what our all-in pledges were offering. I think a lot of people getting quite confused, asking things like, hang on, why am I in a returning pledge why am I paying more than someone who has a new thing? And while I understand on an intuitive level why someone might assume that, I mean, the simple fact is this returning pledge has more things in it than the new player pledge, because you own the master set. You therefore need that fixed pack as well as everything that's new in this campaign. So you're getting more, so you pay more. And I think we'd maybe just assumed that some of that was more obvious to people than it necessarily was. And I think the confusion in a campaign is difficult because it means it slows down that initial rush, and that initial rush is often what helps catapult you forward. However, you know, I think anytime we have seen where something's not working for our backers, we've tweaked it. So we've since, you know, provided the graphics just clearly explaining what exactly is what, and we're providing, you know, all the information we can on shipping, and that went out today. Things like this fireside chat, we really just want to help people understand what they're getting, so they can enjoy it. So yeah, I'd tweak some things around clarity. Perhaps a few people maybe not quite understanding what was on offer, which is a shame because there is a lot on offer, but otherwise, yeah, no, I'm pretty happy with it. I mean, it'd be awesome if we could get over the 200 line. You know, maybe we'll push it to 250. You never know how big the final surge goes, but yeah, would love to keep seeing it going.
Okay, lovely. So one last question. We'll go Paul, Jaya, and end with Tony. Why should people back the Snowdonia GameFound, Paul?
Why? Because Snowdonia is one of the best worker placement games out there, and it offers so much variety in terms of the system itself can be pushed in all sorts of different directions, but still maintain the core elements of the Snowdonia game that we sort of all enjoyed at the very start. And I think then the Grand Tour just takes it to another level. But it's still, you can still see that it's Snowdonia at its core.
And Jaya?
Yeah, I mean, I think Paul said it very well there. This is one of the best worker placement games ever made, and this is the best version of one of the best worker placement games ever made. So get on board for that reason. Honestly, if that's not enough for you, but actually there is something else I would say, is that artistically I think this is offering something really unique in board games as well. We've seen lots of campaigns that have a sense of deluxe through various means, whether that's lots of miniatures or the original master set's lovely printed wooden pieces. What we're offering with these boards is a real sense of immersion and adventure. You're going to go through 14 very distinct different art styles, different feels. You're going to feel like you're in the scenarios you're playing more than ever before, and I think that that's really worth experiencing. Yeah.
And Tony, wrap us up.
Well, I find myself always humbled when I see people's reaction to Snowdonia. This is a game that continues to be exciting and interesting to players after such a long time. We've seen so many games sort of disappear and fall by the wayside over the years, but Snowdonia's somehow hung in there. It's doing something new. The boards aren't just all rehashes of old styles and old mechanisms. It is a proper step forward in the game's universe. It's also looking after the legacy of Snowdonia. The whole campaign is about bringing everybody along with us and not leaving anybody behind. If you've got the master set, if you've got the base game only, you can still find so much here to enjoy that you haven't seen before. And I think fundamentally, if you just take a look at that campaign, that what you get for the different pledge levels, this is astonishing value for money in an age where people don't bat an eyelid at throwing £300 at some campaign for one, or even just an intermediate pledge level. This gives you 12 games, 14 if you buy the whole thing, 14 games for less than £7 a game. I mean, it's just monstrously good value for money. I mean, and in a time of austerity, in a time of the approaching apocalypse, what better than to snuggle down with all of Snowdonia and just enjoy it?
Yeah,
indeed. And so, what a lovely note to end. I'd just like to thank Paul, Jaya, and Tony, and go and back Snowdonia, I guess.
yes, please.
Do it.